$5 million. Sir, that's not a charity gift. It's the largest payment a librarian has ever received for reordering a few old books. The venomous words hung in the still air of the courtroom, cold and sharp as a shard of broken ice. From the witness stand, Eleanor Vance felt the weight of all eyes on her, but she did not flinch. Her gaze swept past the smirking lawyer, then settled on Julian Croft, the man they were trying to turn into a dolt, and the love they were trying to twist into a dirty transaction. Miss Vance, the attorney, Jonathan Pike, his voice dripping with sarcasm, echoed through the silent Suffolk Supreme Courtroom. Please confirm for the jury. Is it true that you, a librarian with a reported annual salary of $62,000, currently reside at Blackwood Manor in Brookline, a $40 million estate owned by Julian Croft? Eleanor Vance swallowed, her hands clasped together in her lap. The cold fluorescent lights overhead seemed to drain the warmth from her face. Yes, she replied, her voice, though she tried to keep it steady, shaking slightly. Pike smirked, a predatory smile that had cornered its prey. He took a step closer to the witness stand, lowering his voice dramatically. And is it also true, Miss Vance, that within a few short weeks of moving into Mr. Croft's home, you and this man old enough to be your father began calling each other names every night? A murmur spread through the courtroom like a hayfire. Eleanor felt her cheeks burn. The question was crude, designed not to elicit the truth, but to paint an ugly picture of her an opportunist, a woman who had used her body to seduce an older, wealthy, vulnerable man. In the front row, she could see Marcus Thorne, Julian's nephew, sitting there with an undisguised smirk. He was the one who had started this nightmare. Eleanor's eyes swept past him, stopping at the man sitting next to her lawyer, Julian Croft. His face was etched with suppressed anger. His hands, the same hands that had once turned the pages of centuries-old books so gently, were now clenched into fists on the oak table. His steel blue eyes looked straight at her, not with suspicion, but with unspoken support, a silent promise that they would get through this together. Taking a deep breath, Eleanor held her head high. She looked straight at Pike, at the jury, at the world that was judging her. She would not let him twist the truth. She would not let him turn their love into a dirty weapon. "Sir," she began, her voice now regaining the steel of a 40-year-old woman who had lived long enough to know her own worth. "You are trying to turn something beautiful into something ugly. If you really want to know the truth, you should start where it all began, 6 months ago." Eleanor Vance's life had a rhythm as predictable as the Dewey Decimal Classification system she knew by heart. Every morning she rode the Green Line to her Boston Public Library branch in Copley Square. She breathed in the smell of old paper and glue, a scent more familiar than her own perfume. She helped students looking for materials, retirees looking for a new mystery novel, and children exploring the world through the colorful pages of picture books. She loved her job, but after more than a decade and a divorce long past, her life had become a tolerable cycle of quiet and loneliness. On a gray Tuesday afternoon in October, an email broke that rhythm. The email subject line read, "Invitation to collaborate from Julian Croft office." Eleanor almost deleted it, thinking it was spam. Julian Croft was a legendary figure in Boston, a tech genius who sold his startup for billions of dollars in his early 40s and then disappeared from public view. Rumor had it that he lived as a hermit after the tragic death of his wife, devoting all his wealth and time to pursuing a single passion, collecting rare books. Curious. She opened the email. The contents were hard to believe. The email, sent from a prestigious law firm, explained that Mr. Croft was looking for a professional librarian or curator to organize, catalog, and preserve his growing collection of private books and manuscripts. The position required extensive knowledge of library science, book history, and preservation skills. The salary offered was $250,000 a year, along with a fully furnished private apartment on the grounds of his Brookline mansion. Eleanor's heart skipped a beat. $250,000, it was more than a dream. But it wasn't the money that gave her pause. It was the chance to work with a collection that no public library could match. It was the promise of an intellectual challenge, a radical departure from the routine. After some hesitation, she emailed back, saying she was interested and wanted more details. A week later, a sleek black sedan pulled up in front of the library to pick her up. The short drive to Brookline was like entering another world. Tree-lined streets gave way to massive iron gates and mansions hidden behind high hedges. The car stopped in front of Blackwood Manor, a beautiful Tudor Revival building of granite and red brick that looked both quaint and imposing. Julian Croft was waiting for her at the door. He was nothing like she had expected. He was tall and lean, with neatly trimmed gray hair and intelligent, intense blue eyes. He wore a simple cashmere sweater and slacks, looking more like a professor than a billionaire. "Miss Vance," he said, his voice low and warm, "thank you for coming. Thank you for inviting me. Mr. Croft," she replied, trying to hide her surprise. "Please call me Julian." He led her inside. The interior of the house was stunning, but Julian seemed oblivious to the opulence around him. He led her straight to what was clearly the heart of the house, the library. Eleanor held her breath. It wasn't a room. It was a sanctuary for books. 2 stories high, the walls lined entirely with intricately carved mahogany bookshelves. A spiral wrought iron staircase led to the upper floors. Afternoon sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, illuminating the stacks of books scattered across tables, chairs, and even the floor. "It's a bit messy," Julian said with a sheepish smile. "I have a passion for collecting, but I lack organizational skills." Eleanor walked in, feeling like an explorer who had just discovered a lost city. She ran her fingers over the spine of a first edition of Moby Dick, recognized a collection of 17th century poems by John Donne, and saw a handwritten manuscript framed neatly on the wall. "This is not chaos," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. "This is potential." They talked for 2 hours. Julian showed her his most prized possessions, telling her the stories behind each book. She could see the pure passion in his eyes. He didn't collect to show off. He collected because he loved the stories and histories they held. Eleanor, for her part, pointed out humidity issues, how to organize different types of books to avoid damage, and proposed a system for digitizing the entire collection. Julian listened intently, nodding in admiration. At the end of the meeting, he looked straight at her. "Miss Vance, I've interviewed 6 other people. All of them have impressive credentials. But you're the only one who can look at this mess and see the beauty in it. This job is yours, if you want it." Eleanor did not hesitate. "I accept." Julian, the first weeks at Blackwood Manor were a whirlwind of work. Eleanor settled into the guest apartment, a lovely space overlooking the back garden, and threw herself into work with an energy she hadn't had in years. She and Julian established a rhythm. Breakfast in the kitchen, where they would plan the day. Hours in the library, the silence broken only by the rustle of papers and animated discussions about a new discovery. Late dinners, often takeout, eaten at the large desk, among open books. Gradually, their conversations moved beyond work. Julian told her about his late wife, Sarah, their love, and her courageous but hopeless battle with cancer. He spoke of the empty loneliness he had felt in their large house since her death. Eleanor, responding to his openness, shared about her own marriage, a relationship that had died slowly due to lack of communication and the relief and emptiness of her divorce. They discover that they share a dry sense of humor, an impatience with pretension, and a deep respect for knowledge. Eleanor realizes that behind the reclusive billionaire's facade, Julian is a kind, thoughtful, and somewhat solitary man. Julian sees in Eleanor not just a brilliant librarian, but a strong, independent woman with a gentle soul. Their friendship was built on a foundation of mutual respect. There was no flirting, no inappropriate gestures, just the growing closeness of 2 people who had found a soulmate in each other. Then one January night, a massive snowstorm, a typical New England nor'easter, hit. The snow was falling heavily, the wind was whistling through the ancient oak trees, and the entire neighborhood lost power. The house was plunged into darkness and silence, lit only by candles and a roaring fire in the library's large fireplace. They could not work any longer. Julian brought out a bottle of fine red wine and 2 glasses. They sat on a thick Persian rug in front of the fireplace, the warmth of the fire dispelling the chill of the winter night. "I haven't felt this peaceful in a long time," Julian confessed, his voice deepening in the flickering firelight. "This house can be so empty." "It's beautiful," Eleanor said softly, "but a house needs life." They talked for hours about lost dreams, regrets, and secret hopes for the future. In that moment, they were no longer boss and employee. They were just 2 people, connected by their shared vulnerability and comfort in each other's company. Julian put down his glass. He turned to her, his eyes searching hers. Then, very slowly, he reached out and gently brushed a lock of hair from her face. His fingers brushed her cheek, and a warm jolt ran down Eleanor's spine. She didn't back away. She didn't say anything. She just looked at him, her heart pounding in her chest. He leaned forward, and his lips found hers. The kiss was neither demanding nor aggressive. It was gentle, tentative, and reverent. It was the kiss of 2 people who had lived through half their lives, each with their own scars, and had unexpectedly found a safe haven in the other. When they pulled apart, they were both breathless. "Eleanor," he whispered, and the way he said her name made it sound like a prayer. "Julian," she replied. And in that name was contained all the acceptance and longing she had been holding back for so long. That night, nothing changed, and everything changed. They didn't sleep together, but an invisible line was crossed. They became Julian and Eleanor, and over the next weeks, their friendship quietly blossomed into a deep, mature love. They shared stolen kisses in the dark corners of the library, hand-holding under the dinner table, and long nights of talking until dawn. They actually started calling each other names every night, but it was a whisper of intimacy, of discovery, of 2 souls finally finding their place. They found happiness in their own little world, a paradise surrounded by the walls of Blackwood Manor and the pages of old books. But they did not know that. Outside those walls, another storm was brewing, a storm created by human greed and jealousy, and it was about to destroy everything. Their peace lasted for almost 2 months. It was an incredibly happy time. For Eleanor, it felt like she was living a dream, doing the work she loved, with a man she had grown to love. For Julian, Eleanor brought light and laughter back into his home, filling a void he had thought would last forever. Marcus Thorne's appearance was like an out-of-tune note in a perfect symphony. He arrived unannounced on a Sunday afternoon, his silver Porsche screeching down the gravel drive. Eleanor and Julian were in the garden, inspecting the rose beds that were just beginning to bud. Marcus stepped out of the car, tall and handsome, with neatly combed hair and an expensive suit. He hugged Julian in a mock hug. "Uncle Julian." "You look amazing, Marcus," Julian said, his tone somewhat wary. "I didn't know you were coming. I just wanted to drop by," Marcus said, and then his eyes fell on Eleanor, an almost imperceptible arch of an eyebrow, an appraising look from head to toe, and this is Eleanor Vance, Julian introduced, placing a hand casually on Eleanor's back. "My collection manager, Eleanor. This is my nephew, Marcus Thorne. Pleased to meet you." "Miss Vance," Marcus said, extending his hand. His grip was cool and casual. "My uncle has spoken at length about his library project. It must be a huge undertaking." His tone emphasized the word attendance, a subtle reminder of Eleanor's position. Throughout the afternoon, Marcus walked through the house as if it were his own, commenting on the value of the furniture and the paintings. He treated Eleanor with outward courtesy, but ignored her for most of their conversation, or asked her only condescending questions like, "Do you find your work here interesting?" Eleanor could sense the hostility behind his smile. He was assessing her, and he didn't like what he saw. He didn't see his uncle's partner. He saw a threat. The tension came to a head when Julian, in a moment of pride, led them into the library to show Marcus one of his most prized possessions. He carefully opened a temperature-controlled wooden box and pulled out an object wrapped in velvet. "This," he said in a low, respectful voice, "is one of the reasons why Eleanor's work is so important." He gently opened the cloth, revealing an old piece of parchment, protected between two panes of glass. On it were printed words in a Gothic style, bold and clear. "What is that?" Marcus asked, looking impatient. "It's an original page from the Gutenberg Bible," Eleanor explained, her eyes lighting up. "One of the first books printed with metal type." "Is it worth?" It was Marcus's first question. "Its value cannot be measured in money." "Marcus," Julian said sternly, "it is a piece of human history. But if you want a figure, experts estimate it to be worth around $5 million. Marcus's eyes widened. $5 million just for one page. "And I have big plans for it," Julian continued, not noticing the greedy glint in his niece's eyes. "Next June, on Sarah and I's 25th wedding anniversary, I'm going to formally donate it to the Harvard University Rare Book Collection. That's what Sarah would have wanted." Silence fell over the room. Marcus's smile froze. "Give it away? Are you kidding? $5 million? You're just going to throw it away. It's family property, our legacy." "It is my legacy, and I will decide what my legacy is," Julian replied, his voice cold. "A legacy is not what you own, Marcus. It is what you leave behind in the world." The confrontation ended there, but a line had been drawn. Marcus stayed another day, and the atmosphere in the house became heavy. He tried to speak to Julian privately, but Julian politely refused. On the morning he left, while Julian was on a phone call, Marcus stopped Eleanor in the hallway. "Listen," he hissed, his gentle demeanor fading, revealing his true, ugly face. "I don't know what game you're playing, but it ends now. You're just a little librarian. Who do you think you are? Do you think you can come in and steal my fortune? I don't know what you're talking about," Eleanor said, trying to keep her cool. "My relationship with your uncle is none of your business." "Not related," he sneered. "Everything about his money is related to me. That damn page is just the beginning. What's next? Will he start giving away paintings? Or this whole house? Listen carefully, you gold-digging whore. Either you convince the old man to keep his property, or I'll make you regret ever coming here. I'll ruin you. I'll tell the press that you're taking advantage of an old widower. Your reputation will be ruined." Eleanor looked him straight in the eye, her initial fear replaced by cold anger. "You don't scare me, Marcus. Julian is the smartest man I know. And you're just a spoiled, selfish boy." She turned and walked away, leaving Marcus standing there, his face red with anger. She told Julian the whole conversation. He sighed, looking tired. "I had hoped he would grow up, but greed has consumed him. Don't worry, Eleanor, he can't do anything to us." But Julian underestimated his nephew's ruthlessness and recklessness. 2 weeks later, a court officer came to Blackwood Manor and handed Julian a document. It was a lawsuit. Marcus Thorne had filed a lawsuit with the court, requesting a hearing to determine Julian Croft's civil capacity. The lawsuit alleged that Julian, due to his age and prolonged grief, was no longer mentally competent to manage his estate. It claimed that he was under the undue influence of Eleanor Vance, an employee who had taken advantage of his loneliness and mental deterioration to manipulate him, with the ultimate goal of seizing his estate. The plan to donate the Gutenberg fragment was presented as the main evidence of Julian's erratic and reckless behavior. The lawsuit asks the court to appoint Marcus Thorne as legal guardian of both Julian and his estate. The storm had come. Their peaceful world had been violated in the most brutal way. Julian was furious, not for himself, but for Eleanor. He dared to do this to you. He gritted his teeth. He dared to smear your name. Eleanor, though frightened, knew this was the time to be strong. He won't win. Julian, she said, placing her hand on his, the truth is on our side. They called David Chen, Julian's lawyer. David read the lawsuit and shook his head. This is a dirty tactic. But it's not unprecedented. They're going to try to make your relationship look dirty in court. They're going to attack your character. Eleanor, are you ready for that? Eleanor looked at Julian, saw the love and concern in his eyes. She knew she was fighting not just for her honor, but for the man she loved, for their future. I am ready, she said firmly. The legal battle began, and the months that followed became a hell of meetings with lawyers, depositions, and trial preparations. The press caught wind of the Billionaire and the Librarian story, and tabloids began to appear, full of innuendo and speculation. Blackwood Manor, once their haven, now felt like a besieged fortress. But amid the chaos, their bond grew stronger. They were a team, an alliance against the world. They knew that the real battle would be in the courtroom, where words would be their weapons, and the truth their only shield. The courtroom was like a ring. All eyes were on Eleanor as she sat on the witness stand. The lawyer, Pike, was circling like a shark, and she was his prey. He had just asked his most vicious question, the one about calling each other names every night, and now he was waiting for her to break. But Eleanor did not collapse. She took a deep breath, the image of Julian looking at her with such trust giving her strength. "Mr. Pike," she began, her voice no longer shaky, but clear and strong. "You are trying to take a phrase out of context? Yes, Julian and I call each other names. We call each other names when we say good morning in the kitchen. We call each other names when we discover a fascinating detail in an old manuscript. And yes, we call each other names in intimate moments, because that is what two people who love and respect each other do." She turned to look at the jury, the ordinary men and women listening to her story. Our relationship didn't start in the bedroom. It started in the library. It was built on hundreds of hours of work together, on a shared passion for history and knowledge. It was built on respect. I respected Julian's intellect, his generosity, and his kind heart, and he respected my expertise and dedication. I was hired for $250,000 a year because I was one of the best in my field. With over 20 years of experience, Julian didn't hire a lover, he hired a professional. Love was a surprise, a wonderful gift that came afterward. It wasn't a business transaction. She looked straight at Marcus, who looked annoyed. Love can't be bought or stolen. Trust can't be bought or stolen. What your client, Mr. Thorne, is trying to do here isn't to protect his uncle. It's to control him. That's greed, not care, and no amount of flowery language can disguise that fact. When she finished, a solemn silence fell over the courtroom. Pike tried to ask a few more questions, but his punches lost their power. Eleanor regained control of her own story. When David Chen stood up to cross-examine her, he asked her only one question. "Miss Vance, do you love Mr. Julian Croft?" "With all my heart," Eleanor replied, without hesitation. "No more questions," David said, and sat down. It was Julian's turn to strike back. David Chen did not call Julian to the stand. Instead, he said, "Your Honor, we will demonstrate that this lawsuit is not only baseless, but also a deliberate act of fraud." He called his first witness a forensic accountant. The accountant, with the help of charts and documents projected onto a large screen, meticulously mapped out Marcus Thorne's finances. It turned out that Marcus had squandered money from a trust fund Julian had set up for him years earlier. Worse, he had gotten into gambling and risky investments, leading to personal debts of more than $800,000. "Your Honor," David said, "the evidence is clear. Mr. Thorne's motive was not filial piety. It was desperation. He needed control of his uncle's assets to save himself from financial ruin." Marcus paled, but the finishing blow was yet to come. "Now," David announced, "I would like to call the next witness, Mr. Arthur Pembroke from New York." An elderly, well-dressed man with horn-rimmed glasses stepped up to the podium. He was identified as one of the world's leading experts on ancient books and manuscripts, the owner of a prestigious gallery on Madison Avenue. "Mr. Pembroke," David began, "do you know the defendant, Sir Marcus Thorne?" I don't know him by sight, Pembroke replied, but I did have an email exchange with someone calling himself Marcus Thorne about 2 months ago. And what was the content of that conversation? He sent me some high-resolution images of an item, Pembroke said, and asked me about its market value, as well as the best way to sell it discreetly. Without any documentation to prove its provenance, David handed him a stack of photos. Are these the ones he sent you? Pembroke put on his glasses and examined them carefully. Yes, there is no doubt about it. This is a page from the Gutenberg Bible. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. The judge had to bang his gavel to restore order. David turned to the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, 2 months ago, long before this lawsuit was filed, Marcus Thorne attempted to sell the very item he claimed to be protecting from his uncle's generosity. He didn't want to protect the family legacy. He wanted to sell it on the black market to pay off gambling debts. Pike, Marcus's lawyer, jumped up. Objection. This is slander. I have the emails here. Your Honor, David said calmly, holding up a stack of papers. Authenticated with full metadata. That was it. The case had collapsed. Marcus's face went from pale to ashen. He had been exposed. The judge, a stern woman with silver hair, regarded Marcus with undisguised contempt. Mr. Thorne, this is one of the most blatant abuses of the legal process I have ever seen in my career. This case is dismissed immediately, and I am referring the entire file on this case, including Mr. Pembroke's testimony, to the district attorney's office for consideration of possible criminal charges against you for perjury and conspiracy to defraud. She banged her gavel on the table. The trial is over. Chaos broke out as the judge left. Reporters rushed forward, cameras flashing. Marcus Thorne sat stunned in his chair, seemingly unable to believe what had just happened. Julian stood up, ignoring everything around him. He walked straight to Eleanor, who was still sitting in the witness box, fighting back tears of relief. He held out his hand to her. When she took it, he pulled her to her feet and hugged her, right in the middle of the courtroom. It's over, he whispered into her hair. You were amazing. Outside the courthouse, on the marble steps. They were surrounded by a crowd of reporters shouting questions. David Chen tried to clear a path for them, but Julian stopped. He turned Eleanor to face him, and amid the flashbulbs and noise, he kissed her. A deep, passionate kiss, a wordless declaration to the world. Thank you for fighting for us, he said, loud enough for those around him to hear. This woman is not a gold digger. She is the love of my life, and the strongest person I know. A few weeks later, life at Blackwood Manor had returned to normal, but it was a new, deeper normal. News of Marcus's fate reached them in fragments. He had been disinherited, faced criminal charges, and shunned by Boston society. But Julian and Eleanor were not gloating. They were simply relieved that the nightmare was over. On a sunny June afternoon, the day Julian had planned for the anniversary, a small, intimate ceremony was held in the library. There were only a few close friends, David Chen and the president of Harvard University. With Eleanor standing by his side, Julian formally presented the Gutenberg Bible fragment to the university. Legacies are not what we keep, he said in his brief speech, echoing the words he had spoken to Marcus, but what we give away. And today, I give this piece in memory of my late wife, Sarah, and in honor of the woman who taught me to love and believe again, Eleanor Vance. After the guests had left, the library returned to its familiar silence. The golden afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows, dusting the spines of the books with a golden dust. Eleanor was replacing a book on the shelf when Julian came up behind her. Eleanor, he said softly. She turned back. He was looking at her with a tenderness that melted her heart. I thought a lot about what makes a collection, he said. It's not just the individual pieces, it's how they come together to tell a story. My collection, my life, was missing the most important piece, the piece that holds it all together. He did not kneel. That would have seemed too grandiose to them. Instead, he simply took her hand. Of all my treasures, you are the most precious. Eleanor Vance. Will you become my wife and write the rest of your life with me?" He pulled a small, dark blue velvet box from his pocket. He opened it. Inside was an Art Deco engagement ring with a sapphire blue diamond in the center, surrounded by smaller diamonds that sparkled like stars. It was delicate, elegant, and unique, just like their love. Tears rolled down Eleanor's cheeks, but this time, they were tears of pure joy. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Julian, I do." He slipped the ring on her finger. It fit perfectly. And then he kissed her. A kiss of beginnings, of the promise of happy years ahead. They stood there, among the books that had brought them together. No longer billionaire and librarian, but two people who had found their home in each other. That night, and many nights after, they called each other's names in the darkness of their bedroom overlooking the garden. But now, those names were no longer whispers of discovery, but affirmations of a love that had been tested by fire and proven true. They had found a love strong enough to face lies, resilient enough to overcome greed, and deep enough to last until the very end of their lives. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. If you love this story, don't forget to click like to support the channel. Share this story with family and friends, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any stories.